This video is part 2 of dynamic date lists. If you have not already watched part 1, feel free to go back and check it out. In part 1, we basically created this object called last 12 months. And when we use it in a report, it will show us the latest 12 months of data that we have in our model. Well, with this part 2, what I want to show you is a way to do a rolling set of periods that are not always based on the latest time periods. Okay, meaning I could pick any point in time and say from that spot, I want that period and the previous 12 as an example. Okay, so we're going to see how to do that in this instance. So this is basically going to leverage a feature we call parameterization. When you're setting up parameters, one of the easiest ways to build parameters is to pick the attribute that you want to base the parameter on. So like in this case, the months, I can just right click and just say create a parameter. And what it will do is it will build a parameter for me. And I'm going to make this a shareable object so that I can reuse it. And I'm just going to call this month parameter. And I want to base my rolling time period on this parameter. All right. To do this, we're going to use formulate again. So we're going to build a list in formulate. And in this instance, instead of starting with the full list of months, we're specifically going to focus on the parameter. So I'm just going to remove that, and I'm going to use an object called the range list. And the range list is going to allow me to pick a grouping of members. And with a range, you always have a start and an end. It turns out in Pyramid's PQL language, it doesn't matter whether you start at the beginning and end with the latest month or vice versa. It doesn't matter the order. As long as you've got a range of values, it will always return them in chronological order. So you can do however you need to, just so that we can kind of think of it as a start and end. I'm going to jump to the second parameter, which is the end parameter. And we're going to leverage this parameter that we just built. And so if I go look at my list, I can see, okay, month parameter, this object that I just built, that's going to be the ending period. And then I want, let's say, the previous 11, so it would be a total of 12. So for this last one, I'm just going to say I want the month parameter. For the first one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the same parameter, but instead of checking the box that I want this parameter, what you'll see is if I hold my mouse over this parameter object, you'll see over here on the far right, I get this little FX function. Now, FYI, if your screen real estate is not wide enough, sometimes this little button is not visible. Okay, and you will only see this button when you're working with a formulate object. So if in this case, we're going to use it with the formulate object. So I'm going to click on that button. What it does is it gives me the relative reference functions. You'll see that that function is available up top generically, but in this case, I want it to be applied to the parameters. So I'm going to click that little button, and I've got 4 options: lag, lead, next, and previous. In this case, we're going to choose lag and say we want to go 11 positions back. All right. So we're going to basically say whatever parameter they've selected, go 11 periods back. That's what lag means, is go back. And we're going to use that as our starting point. So we're going to start 11 positions back, 11 periods back, and then we're going to go up to the parameter value. So whatever period that I'm looking at. All right. So if I were to run this, you're going to see initially in the preview, it's just going to return one value. That's because the parameter defaults to a specific value. But if I look at the logic, it's using a range function, and it's basically saying I want to go lag 11 up to the specified parameter. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and save this, and we're going to call this rolling 12 months. Okay, and then to utilize this, we're going to go back to our original trend chart that's using the last 12. And I'm going to change this now and use the rolling 12. And what you'll see is when I choose rolling 12, I actually get a drop down to pick my date, in this case my month, and I'm going to pick any month, and it's going to give me that month, which is April 2016, and the previous 11. So we've got May through April. And so as I pick any time period, it's going to give me that time period and the previous 11 periods. Okay, so now I can pick any period I want, and it will give me that rolling. Once you've got that object, you can then start doing interesting things with it, such as you could aggregate it. So maybe you want the average for the last 12 months. I want the max, the min, things like that. You'll see those options are available under the formulate, where I can do average, max, min, or aggregate. It just depends on how you want to use that logic, but the idea being to do a rolling set of periods, all you have to do is use a range operator in conjunction with a parameter object. And remember, in our testing, we had the test only return a single month. If you want your testing to actually look a little bit better, then what I would recommend is in your parameter, if you were to open that parameter up and formulate, there is a default value. So you could, in fact, just pick the last one as the default. And that way, when you go to test your sets, it actually has something other than the first member. So now the last member is selected by default. And now in my testing, I can see it is, in fact, returning 12 months. So just be aware that you can set that rolling time period by leveraging the parameter object, and then making sure that parameter object has a valid default will make testing it that much easier. So hopefully that makes sense. The difference, of course, being the last 12 are always the latest. The rolling 12 is I have to pick an ending month, and it will give me that month and the previous 11. So hopefully that helps.